The New York Times this week front-paged a great piece about money that you didn't notice you have. As one part of the stimulus bill, the Obama administration gave 95% of Americans a tax cut, up to $400 a year for individuals and $800 a year for married couples. Now, don't get excited about this coming down the pike. The fact is, you already got this. It's just that nobody noticed it because it didn't arrive in the form of a check. It didn't arrive as a lump sum payment. Instead, it's been coming to you directly through your paycheck in the form of a few extra dollars every week. An average family getting about $65 a month from this tax cut. Now, that happens to be the most economically stimulative way to give people a tax cut. If you just get a lump sum check in the mail, you're more likely to put that check in the bank and save it. But instead, if you just get a few more dollars in your paycheck, you are more likely to spend those dollars to thereby add demand to our nation's supply and demand, and that's what stimulates the economy. Economically, it is totally the most responsible way to do tax cuts as stimulus. You literally hope that people don't notice the few extra dollars in their check and they spend them. But for Democrats and the White House, people not getting this as a big fat check in the mail also meant that this tax cut has not converted itself into, hey, I cut your taxes, political capital. I mean, taxes in general are hard to get our heads around. How much did you pay last year, for example? What tax bracket are you in? Do you remember exactly how much you paid in taxes last year, the dollar amount? If I asked you, can you please tell me the exact dollar amount you paid last year, would you be able to tell me without looking it up? If you were Bank of America, you could. Bank of America paid this much in taxes last year. Bank of America paid exactly $00.00. Bank of America paid nothing in taxes last year. Another mega financial institution, Citibank, also paid $0 in taxes. Nothing. The General Electric Corporation, a.k.a. Big Papa around here, our parent company, GE, also paid $0 in taxes. Zippo, a net of zero. Each one of those companies paid $0 in corporate taxes. And they're not alone. There's lots of companies in this boat, even big ones. And it's not that these corporations even necessarily had a bad year last year. They all earned significant income, but none of them paid anything in taxes, $00.00, which means you, in all likelihood, you personally paid more in taxes than Bank of America, Citibank, and GE did last year. You personally probably paid more than all of them combined. Why is that? Because in America, it is good to be a corporation. The tax code is set up in a way that big companies find loopholes and they move their revenue around and they structure their books so that they end up netting out paying an effective tax rate of very little. Very little. Like in some cases, nothing. And you can tell from our politics that politicians are counting on us not understanding that.
We can do better by creating the environment to attract business. We can lower our corporate tax rate. You know, we have the largest tax rate, the corporate tax rate in the world at 35%. The average is 18%.
We also need to talk about taxation as well. You know, the corporate tax rate, why is Ireland at 12.5%? Here we're at 25 to 35%.
Indeed, I would argue there are some additional tax cuts we need to make. When we're dealing with a 35% tax on business when the world average is 18%, we're increasingly uncompetitive.
Sure, it's 25, 35%, 35% corporate taxes. And the net taxes that lots of corporations pay work out to be significantly less than 35%. How do you do 0 as a percent of 35%? Divide by. Lots of Republicans running for office this year are promising to cut that onerous corporate tax rate. If Bank of America, Citibank, GE, lots of other corporations are already paying a net tax rate of 0, if they're paying $0, what exactly is cutting that tax rate going to do for them? I'm sorry, we're finding $0 such a burden. Next year we really need some tax relief. We need to pay less than that. This is a perfect case study for understanding what it is to run for office in election 2010. It is true, it is a true fact that 95% of Americans got a fat tax cut from the Democrat stimulus bill. That is true. But nobody believes it. On the other hand, it is not true that corporations generally pay onerous taxes in this country. In fact, many of the biggest ones pay nothing. But Republicans are counting in this election on everybody believing that the corporate tax rate is super onerous. Ta-da!
November November 2nd is the time for choosing, and at that time for choosing, we will choose those who promise to cut the corporate tax rate.
We have the second highest corporate tax rate in the industrialized world.
We take out this corporate tax rate.
We ought to lower the corporate tax rate.
If I had my way, we'd lower the corporate tax rate.
Cut the corporate tax rate, maybe by as much as a third.
We believe we ought to cut corporate tax rates. We believe we ought to change the disadvantage that our corporations have.
It sucks to have to pay $0 in taxes. We've got to make that easier for them. Joining us now is Chris Hayes, Washington editor of The Nation magazine and MSNBC contributor. Thanks for being here, Chris.
Thanks, Rachel. What I want to know is how much in taxes Cabletown is paying with a K.
Cabletown?
Yeah, that's the new owner of NBC and 30 Rock.
Oh, very good. Cabletown. Cabletown. All right. Isn't this the best possible year for Democrats to be saying, I stand with you and the Republicans stand with the big guy? Look at how they're trying to protect the big guy. Look at these loopholes. I mean, how come this corporate tax cut stuff is not seen by Democrats as more of a soft target for hitting Republicans?
It's a really good question. I think, A, it's a failure of imagination, right? I think that Democrats have been sort of beaten into submission on the tax issue. I mean, even liberal Democrats, right, want to talk about for whom should we cut taxes, right? That's the debate, is for whom should we cut taxes? It's just inconceivable that anyone anywhere, whether a corporation or a person or a rich person, should pay more in taxes. I mean, we've seen the debate over letting the Bush tax cuts expire, but any kind of affirmative raising of taxes or even enforcement of current tax law is viewed as Democrats as somehow politically toxic. And I think you're right. I think that's wrong. I think you can run 30-second ads that say, look, Bank of America, who caused this financial crisis, paid $0 in taxes this year, and you paid a heck of a lot more than that, and there's something wrong with that. And I think it is a winning political issue, but so far Democrats haven't done much with it.
I feel like in years past, Democrats have made an issue of corporate loopholes, about tax loopholes,
Sure.
about people getting away with it. And that's the sort of thing that I feel like there is a Democratic vocabulary for it. We're just not seeing it this year. Do you think it's a strategic decision to not do it in 2010, even though they might do it in other years? After the economic crisis, you would think that this would be the year of all years to do it.
Yes, I mean, so there's a few things here. One is that, you know, there was an attempt to shut down some of the loopholes, which died a kind of embryonic death in committee, particularly the loopholes that were all over the news today, with Google paying like 2% in taxes and all these esoteric terms like the double Irish and the Dutch sandwich and all these bizarre, tax loopholes that involve moving money around the globe in all sorts of esoteric ways. The problem was that never came up for a vote, right? So there was never some sort of like stand on the battlement moment where you can say, look, we voted for this, this is what we want, this is what they want. That line was never drawn. So now coming down the stretch, it's a harder thing to run on, right? Because you never had that fight up front.
What about the larger Democratic issue of talking about the economy, right? It is, I mean, it's hard to dramatize. Things would be worse, right?
I know.
It's hard to make a dramatic thing that didn't happen. But it seems criminal. It seems like political criminal malpractice that less than 10% of people in this country know that they got a fat tax cut that they in fact got. How is that even possible?
You know, I'm so glad that you pointed out that New York Times article, which is by a great reporter named Michael Cooper, who's been writing about the stimulus effects. And here's the way I think about that stimulus, right? Let's say you hired someone to water your lawn. There's two ways they could do it. They could take the hose and they could point it in one spot in the lawn and they can create a huge pond. So when you came home from work, you knew the lawn was watered, and yet it wasn't very good for the lawn. Or they could actually do the right thing for the lawn, right? Is spread the water around, and by the time you got home and it all evaporated and you didn't know it was watered, it was the best thing for the lawn. And I think this is really a case of the Obama administration, to their tremendous credit, right? Choosing policy over politics. I mean, they didn't do the thing that would have been the more politically expedient thing to do, but the less stimulative thing to do. And they're getting killed for it. At the end of the day, I think there's a certain kind of noble fidelity to good policy represented in that. But you're right. It's criminal and crazy that they haven't been able to let people know that that tax cut is there.
If you are that lawn care company, you may be doing the right thing by lawns everywhere, except you will go out of business.
Exactly.
If people come home from work and think that you have not watered their lawn. So, I mean, you don't have to do something bad in order to get noticed, but you at least need to, I don't know, set up a webcam so your clients can see the sprinkler while they're at work. You got to do something to showcase this stuff.
No, and that's true. And remember, I mean, everybody should remember the extreme example of this, right, is that when the Bush tax cuts got passed, I don't know if you'll remember this, but they actually sent a check, right? The IRS sent a check, and the check said in the header, it was like, thanks to the Tax Relief Act of 2003, passed by and said the name George W. Bush in the United States Congress, you received this money. I mean, and that was, look, I mean, that was totally crass, but it was effective.
Yeah, crass but effective. Crass but effective. This should be a mantra for Democrats. Crass but effective. Chris Hayes, Washington editor of The Nation magazine, MSNBC contributor. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Rachel.